Glad to see you back for more. And if it's your first time, stay tuned for facts, action, insight, and a smoke flavor-filled podcast. It's All Day with JJ. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode with yours truly at the All Day with JJ platform. Your host, JJ, and just kind of excited, bro. It's football season. It's going to be a definitely impactful time, especially for this podcast series, considering the fact that I myself am a former football player, and I kind of just want to give the fans an insight on what it's like, not only as a player, but also as a coach, considering the fact that I am currently coaching high school football as well. And I'm going to use teams like the one that you see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, LSU, as well as my favorite team in the NFL, as well as quite a lot of other football teams in the NFL. But like I said, specifically the Dallas Cowboys, which is my favorite team, to kind of show you what schemes and coverages and things like that are going down on a day-to-day basis, not only on the field, but also within the film room and things like that. But before we get into that, man, I just wanted to give a quick little segment on baseball. I've been promising a lot of you guys a baseball piece, a small little piece to just trying to showcase, what's going on in the Major League Baseball world. And by doing that, I'm going to use my favorite team, the Rangers. But stay tuned, because I'm also going to do another segment besides this one on the Braves, because I am in Atlanta. But the Rangers, man, are kind of, we've had a great season. And of course, if you've been a former Rangers fan, you kind of know the heartbreak that comes to mind when you think of guys like Nelly Cruz, when we lost to the Cards and things like that. But currently, man, the Rangers are actually battling it out against Seattle and Houston. Seattle was leading the division at 77-60. Houston's coming in at second place. We hate the Astros. If you're from Texas, we do not mess with you. It's all about the Triple D. It's all about Dallas. But Houston coming in at second place at 78-61. And then here come the Rangers at 76-61. One game back from the top spot, and we're currently playing the Astros right now in a series, I want to say best of three. Do not quote me on that, but we recently just lost the first round of games against Houston Astros, and now we got a second game that's currently going on right now, which I do not think is going that well. But hopefully when this airs, we'll hopefully have bounced back and made tremendous strides. But diving into the Rangers, man, let's talk about some of their hotshot players. How can you leave out Corey Seager? Basically, I want to say one of the best players, if not the best player on the team at shortstop, coming in with a batting average of .345, as well as outfielder Adolis Garcia, who's basically our right fielder, who's got 34 home runs. I'm pretty sure he's leading the team in that, as well as 100 ribbies, RBIs, for those of you who don't know what ribbies are. And Garcia's ability to just be in the batter's box and bring in runs when runners are in scoring position is honestly, to me, very impactful when you're looking at a baseball team, especially trying to make a race for the pennant and trying to make a race for October. Another crazy stat for you. If you don't know, the Rangers had 6 All-Stars, 5 of which who started. If you want to look at our middle infield, which is pretty much where a lot of our major power comes from, Marcus Semien, second baseman, Corey Seager, shortstop, Josh Jung, third baseman, Jonah Heim, catcher, Adolis Garcia, right fielder. All 5 were starters in the All-Star game, as well as Nathan E. or Eovaldi, which was one of our major pitchers with 11 wins, who also made it to the All-Star game. So shout out to the Rangers for doing something that hasn't been done in quite some time. And also shout out to our first baseman, Nathaniel Lowe. You've been very productive for me and my fantasy team within baseball. And for those of you who've never played fantasy baseball, it's actually quite interesting. I suggest you get involved. It'll allow you to get more involved with the game, especially from a pitcher standpoint, as well as just understanding how fantasy baseball stacks up against things like fantasy football and fantasy basketball. But all in all, I just want to give you a little short piece on baseball, man. Shout out to my baseball lovers. Shout out to the Rangers. Of course, I got to give a shout out to the Braves, who are 90-46, leading the league in overall dubs, because we are in Atlanta. Shout out to Truist Park. I think it's one of the prettiest parks in the league. And shout out to the Battery, bro. I think it's a great area that you can come to when you come to Atlanta. But all that being said, shout out to Jacob deGrom as well, bro. I know he had a torn UCL early on in the season, and he eventually had to do the Tommy John's ordeal. But, according to past stats, some of these pitchers can actually come back from a Tommy John surgery and be pretty productive. So hopefully deGrom still got a major output. Shout out to deGrom, because I originally drafted him in fantasy, but when he got hurt, it kind of hurt me. But all in all, man, let's go ahead and dive into the thing that I am most excited about, and that is football season. Last week we actually just had week 1 of college football, and this week we got week 2 of college football as well as week 1 of the NFL season. And I think this is probably going to be one of the most important segments of the cast, bro, because I'm not only going to provide fans with insight on current football happenings, but I also want to give y'all insight on what it's like from a former player as well as a current coach in high school right now, to just kind of let you guys know what's going on from a coverage, scheme, personnel, game plan type of deal. And I'm going to use teams like the one you see in your bottom left-hand corner that I actually had the opportunity to play for, the Louisiana State University, as well as some of my favorite teams in the NFL, those being the Cowboys, those being the Ravens, and even teams like the Broncos with Sean Payton being acquired as the head coach and Russell Wilson still coming up kind of in his latter part of his career. I think it's going to be a great time, and I'm so excited to have you guys listening in right now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and chop into college football, man. Shout out to Deion Sanders. If none of you have heard, Colorado, the head coach is Deion Sanders right now. They just came off a crazy upset dub against TCU, the previous national runner-ups, beating a 17th ranked team, and Shedeur Sanders, the starting quarterback, son of Deion Sanders, throws for 510 passing yards with 4 tuds, 0 interceptions with an 81% completion rate. Dude came out with a QBR, but I think it was like 90.6 or 91 of rating for a QBR, which is actually insane. To kind of give you insight on that QBR, if you are rated like a 60 or above in the NFL, you're considered elite. It basically means that you're probably going to win about 60 to 70% of your games. This kid, Shedeur Sanders, honestly caught a lot of flack for playing at Jackson State, being a quarterback in the HBCU realm, and a lot of people saying that he wasn't facing the best competition. Although it was game 1, the dude came out and broke a school record and showed out. And not to mention one of his best counterparts who has the D on the shirt, aka a dog, according to Deion, Travis Hunter, man, playing over 100 snaps. I want to say he played around 120, 130 snaps. Some reports even had him playing 140 snaps on both the offense and defensive side of the ball, bro. Looking at Travis Hunter's stats, 11 receptions for 119 yards, 3 tackles, 1 interception. It doesn't get any better than that. When you talk about Heisman watch, you've got 2 solid players right there on the Colorado Buffs team that could possibly be within the Heisman finalists when you look at it when it's all said and done. I mean, shout out to Travis Hunter. He came out and said that he was going to be in the Heisman watch, and he came out and he showcased his abilities in game 1. And let's not forget Shiloh Sanders, the other Sanders kid that's on the other side of the ball. Dude had 9 solo tackles with 1 assisted, total for 10. Shout out to the Sanders kids. Shout out to Deion for talking that trash. I love it. Putting everybody on the map and letting everybody know, hey, it doesn't matter if you're an HBCU kid, if you're a Power 5 kid, if you're a D1 AA, if you're a D2, D3, there's talent everywhere. Usually the only difference comes into play when you look at the trenches, which will be very interesting when you look at Colorado, them having to face Nebraska this upcoming week, as well as the further Pac-12 teams like USC with Caleb Williams, them boys blowing San Diego State out, as well as Oregon, teams like Utah and things like that. Should be very interesting. I'm excited to see what Colorado has to do with the upcoming games and the upcoming schedule. I'm excited to see what Deion's got to say. And like he said in his post-game interview, do you believe? Because if you don't right now, then I don't know what's going on with you. But let's go ahead and chop into the main elephant in the room. The LSU Tigers, man. I've had a lot of people come up to me off pod talking, asking questions about what happened. You know, of course, in case you haven't heard, we lost to Florida State. Got beat pretty bad in the second half. And to kind of just break down in the personnel first and foremost, let's look at Jaden Daniels, our starting quarterback for the LSU Tigers, who was arguably rated as the #1 quarterback in the SEC, as well as also being on the Heisman Watch finalist, or as a Heisman finalist. He ended up the game with 347 passing yards, 1 TD, 1 TD, 1 interception, and 64 yards of rushing off of, I want to say, 15 carries, and majority of those were just him evading the pocket. His counterpart, Jordan Travis for the Florida State Seminoles, had 342 passing yards with 4 TDs and 1 interception. He had 3 more TDs, but only about with 5 less yards of passing. So when you look at that grand scheme of things, it's almost like both the quarterbacks kind of played the exact same game from a passing perspective as well as a rushing perspective. I want to say Jordan Travis had, I think, 47 yards when evading the pocket and things like that. But Man, let me go ahead and dive into it. You know, a lot of people have been asking me my opinion on things like Brian Kelly, the LSU Tigers, that first game, and I've been telling a lot of people, if you really want to know, dive into the pod. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break into the first segment of All Day with JJ's breakdown into a football scheme and analysis. Looking at the first half, we actually moved the ball. We, as in the LSU Tigers, were able to move the ball down the field at a pretty productive rate. But when we got into the red zone, man, one of the biggest things that I feel like I disliked as not only a fan but also a current coach is we had an opportunity on 4th and short, and I think we lined up in a 2x2, which is just 2 receivers on each side with 5 down linemen, the quarterback, and the shotgun, with a back on what I call sidecar, which is on either side of the quarterback. And I think we tried to run the ball in with no protection. And to me, I think once you get in the red zone, you definitely need to come in with something like a jumbo package or an old school offset or I formation where you put at least maybe 6 or 7 guys on the line where there's unbalanced, meaning you bring maybe 5 guys to one side or 4 guys to one side and put 2 to 3 on the other side, depending on where you place the center, and you have a guy in the backfield, depending on if he's on the right or the left side, if he's offset, and you basically just line up the quarterback under center and you hand it off. I think that's one of the hardest things that you can stop, not only in college football, but also in football in general, whether it's on the pros, college, pee-wee, or whatever level. And I think that's one of the biggest things that LSU did not do was showcase the run game. I think in total we had maybe 12 carries, four carries per 3 different running backs. And if you're Florida State, in all honesty, if you only got 12 carries from each running back with a total of 113 yards, 64 of which coming from the quarterback evading the pocket, I mean, if you're not going to respect the run game, why should you respect the pass game? You know, in order for you to be able to have a great pass game, you got to respect the run game. And a lot of people have been asking me about Brian Kelly and what I think about him coming off his successful first year last year of a winning season. And to be completely honest, Brian Kelly got out coached as well as his coaching staff. And I don't necessarily want to blame this on the kids or the guys who suited up and put on that purple and gold, but I more so want to blame it on the preparation and the coaches for not truly putting those guys in positions to win. Because when you look at the grand scheme of things, Brian Kelly comes from that Notre Dame style of offense, which has always usually had a dominant offensive line. Shout out to Zach Martin, one of the great offensive linemen for the Dallas Cowboys. But when you look at the LSU Tigers and our offensive side of the football, our offensive line is probably our weakest element. I mean, we've always had great receivers. Look at the wide receiver history from guys like OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Jay Jettas, Jamar Chase, 2 of the guys that I actually had a great opportunity to play with. We've always been pretty solid in the wide receiver room as well as the quarterback room, with Joe Burrow, of course, going dummy with Cincinnati. So to me, in order to truly help out Jaden Daniels, we definitely needed to have a run game to keep Florida State honest, to stop them from blitzing so much, to more so force them to fill the box. You know, the box being from end to end, from down lineman to down lineman. And of course, LSU is, if you look at our history, I mean, when we had Lenny back in the backfield, we've always been known to run the football. That's why teams like Alabama have always stacked the box and put 7 to 8 guys in the box to try to focus on the run to force our quarterback to beat us. When I feel like you have a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, especially when you look at his repertoire from the ability to be able to pass and also use his feet to get first downs, I think you have to line up and run the football and force opposing teams to respect the run. You know, a lot of people like to get pass happy. You look at the Pac-12, you look at the Big 12. For example, you look at Colorado. I mean, they had 3 or 4 receivers over 100 yards. A lot of players and a lot of coaches love the passing game. They love to air it out. They love the air raid in today's football as far as schemes and concepts. But me being a former running back, you got to respect the run game. You got to be able to rely on your running backs to get you key yards, at least 4 to 5 yards a pop, so that you can either come back and do a play action and throw it over the top. I myself am a big pro style type of coach, big pro style type of player. I love the fact of going under center, because I think you force the defense to either choose a side to blitz, and from there you can really kind of counteract your game plan to allow your offense to really develop. Also, another good coaching point that I feel like I would give the LSU coaches if I were in their offensive room, I would tell Jaden Daniels, especially when we line up on a certain hash, to focus on the shorter side of the field, right? To kind of break it down to a more simpler level, to kind of get him more comfortable in the pocket. Like last year, we did a lot of read option, but once we played A&M, for those of you who are true LSU fans, you can kind of see the way they combated the read option. They started blitzing not 1 but 2 guys off the edge. So Jaden Daniels would read the 1 guy off the edge. For those of you who don't understand football, a read option is where the quarterback lines up in shotgun, running back lines up either to the left or the right, and they basically run an inside zone play, and the quarterback's main object is to read the farthest most down lineman, which is usually a defensive end. For those football players, you're usually probably in a 5 to 7 tech, and he reads that defensive end, and if he crashes down, Jaden Daniels will pull the ball. If he comes up and he plays contain, of course Jaden Daniels will hand it off. But teams like A&M, if you go back and you look at that game, what they started doing was with that down lineman, they started bringing extra pressure after the down lineman, and so the down lineman would crash, which would force Jaden Daniels to pull the ball, and after he would pull it, they would have another guy blitzing to make the play. If I'm in that offensive staff, like I said earlier, I would tell Jaden Daniels, whenever we go shotgun, especially when we're on either hash, I would tell him to focus on the weaker side of the field, which is usually the short side of the field. In football terms, you got what's called the field and the boundary. The boundary is usually the shorter side of the field. I would tell him to focus on the boundary and usually line up maybe a two wide receivers out there and have them run a levels concept. Usually have the outside, which is the number one receiver, probably run like a deep route, which whether it be a 10-yard dig or a post route or something like that, and have the number 2 receiver either running out or like a wheel, depending on whatever coverage we're looking at. But if you're Jaden Daniels, I would tell you, look, I want you to focus on the boundary side of the field. I want you to read 1 to 2. If that's not there, I want you to check your delayed leak out from the running back. I'd have the running back probably stand and protect for 1,000 to 2,000 yards, or 1,000 to 2,000 seconds, and then I have the running back leak out. I would tell Jaden Daniels, you know what? Look 1 to 2. If it's not there, check it down to your running back. If that is not there, then go ahead and take off. And even so, if you feel like you're feeling pressure after your 1 and 2 aren't there, just take off. Once you do things like that, I think you allow your offense to really start to evolve, and you allow your quarterback to start to get comfortable in offensive situations, right? Bringing it back to the game and bringing it back to Brian Kelly and some of his decisions. You know, early on we had 2 fourth downs where we went 0 for 2 on fourth down efficiency. I think we should have taken the points, especially in a home opener to a team that we lost to the previous year. Also considering the fact that we were at Camping World Stadium in Orlando, which is basically backyard to the Florida State Seminoles, I would have potentially taken the points, although we did go into the second half leading 17-14. When you look at the grand scheme of things, we didn't put any more points up after that. Transitioning into the defensive side of things, I think we've got a lot of transfers in, especially in the defensive secondary, and Florida State's receivers had they were some pretty big targets. You know, we had Keon Coleman, who was 6'4", which is already kind of insane. I mean, 6'4" could either pass for a starting point guard or shooting guard in the NBA, as well as Johnny Wilson at 6'7", which is insane. A tight end type of frame playing a wideout position is actually almost OD when you look at target specialty. But from a defensive standpoint, you know, early on in the first quarter, they started to attack us, specifically Harold Perkins. Shout out to Perk. You know, he had a great freshman year last year. But the biggest thing that I also tell people about hotshot freshmen or hotshot rookies in the NFL, once you come back after your first year, you know, these teams have film on you, so they know kind of how to exploit you. With Perk, man, we kind of had Perkins out in coverage a little bit too much. I would have honestly brought Perkins down and blitzed him more so often than not, rather than putting him in coverage. If you go back and you look at the film, I mean, Jordan Travis pretty much just found wherever Harold Perkins was, and he threw to that receiver. But looking back at our secondary, man, you know, we had one of the best DB coaches in the country in Corey Raymond in past history. We're also DBU when you look at the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, Trey White, Grant Delpit, Greedy Williams, guys who are also very well known household name, Pat Pete. And I think that we kind of went away from a strong defensive secondary than what we're normally used to. And looking at that defensive secondary, man, to kind of just look at some of the adjustments that we made. If you look at one of those plays, I think Florida State had just went for it. I don't know if it was 3rd or 4th down, but you can see Keon Coleman lining up on the outside on the right side of Jordan Travis. After they go for it on 3rd or 4th down, he looks over to his sidelines and he's signaling, throwing his hands up as if he wants a go ball because he can tell that we're in man coverage. Boom, very next play, they throw a go ball up to Keon Coleman. He snags in the end zone, and they just trusted their athlete. From a defensive standpoint, as a defensive coach, I feel like once you see that, because it looks like we were playing a cover 3, which is usually you have three defensive backs in the secondary, usually playing about what they call deep thirds, or the deep halves of the field with a lock up top is what I like to call it. Looks like we had cover 3 with a lock up top, which is basically a guy just playing man coverage on the top receiver. If you're looking at a TV screen, he's on the top half of the screen. They got us because this guy was playing man coverage against Keon Coleman. They went over top to Keon Coleman, one-on-one man coverage. It's really just a matter of trusting your athletes, and of course, Florida State's athlete won. As a defensive coach, I feel like if you're in the box or even on the sidelines, once you see that, you then have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, instead of playing this cover 3, maybe we can come back and play a cover 2 man, which is just kind of 2 safeties lined up high and 2 corners just playing pressed, kind of in a man position, playing a cover 2 man, and then just taking one of those safeties and playing him over the top on Keon Coleman or even Johnny Wilson, depending on whichever target Jordan Travis is targeting. But all in all, to just kind of give you a little bit of the football aspect of things, I'm just kind of getting super excited for that because I feel like I'll be able to have the opportunity to break down a lot of games, not only from the college football standpoint, but also from the NFL standpoint. So if you don't mind, please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to drop in the comment section who your favorite team is so that I can also dive into that. And with us speaking about football season, I mean, of course, fantasy is in full effect. And to kind of just give you my opinion on fantasy, man, I'm kind of in, I want to say 5 fantasy leagues right now. It's kind of getting out of control, as well as a few pick'ems leagues to pick, each NFL game, 15 or 16 games straight up every week. To kind of give you my insight on fantasy for you fantasy lovers, man. There are tons of mock drafts that you can do out there, but if I were honestly I would always draft running backs and then receivers and then try to get quarterbacks in the 6th or 7th round. I think that's pretty common knowledge depending on how much you participate in fantasy. But I would also try to stray away from some of the top, 3 to 5 highly ranked players depending on their position, specifically guys like Austin Eckler or George Kittle, because these guys have kind of been well known to be top 5 draft picks, and I think they're starting to descend when you look at projected points, because not only do they have to combat NFL teams with major film, but they're also starting to combat facts of, can they stay healthy? Can they be safe? Like, look at Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is, of course, one of the top, if not number 1, number 2, arguably best tight ends for fantasy. He just went down with a hyperextended knee, and he's now questionable for Sunday's game. So it's like, when you look at guys like, Travis Kelce, George Kittleman, or George Kittle, whatever his last name is. Forget the 49ers because I'm a Cowboys fan. Or even guys like Jay Jettas, I start to somewhat get a little bit questionable on selecting these guys early on. I mean, great example for that is Christian McCaffrey. You go look at Christian McCaffrey in his year 3. He was definitely by far one of the hotshot running backs in the NFL for the Carolina Panthers. Of course, in every single draft, he was being projected as the number 1, the number 2 pick, and I actually had a bet with my old man that year that Christian McCaffrey was going to have more all-purpose yards than Ezekiel Elliott, which was, I think, year 3 or year 4 for both running backs. I ended up losing because Christian McCaffrey, of course, ended up getting hurt. I want to say it was either between week 1 and week 3 with a high ankle sprain that actually kept him out for 9 weeks. So when you look at things like that, it's like, okay, hey, if I'm playing in a fantasy league against my buddies, or I'm playing in a fantasy league against some of my colleagues at work, let me actually take into consideration some of these true football statistics when you're just not looking at projected points, right? You've also got to look at things like additions to the team, as well as quarterback. For example, you want to look at the Carolina Panthers, right? They just recently acquired Adam Thielen, and they also got DJ Chark. Shout out to DJ, another one of my teammates from the past. When you look at guys like that and you start drafting these guys, later in the rounds, you also got to consider Bryce Young coming in as a rookie quarterback and seeing how proficient he's going to be. Or you look at the Houston Texans with Dalton Schultz being one of the tight ends that came from the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys had Dak Prescott. He targeted Dalton Schultz quite a bit last year, but now him being with the Houston Texans organization, last year he might have been a decent tight end for fantasy, but him with CJ Stroud, you don't know. You don't know how CJ's going to operate as a rookie, or how he's going to basically look to target his types of receivers. And then even guys looking at looking at guys like Russell Wilson, right, with the Denver Broncos. You know, last year Russell Wilson wasn't truly as productive as people probably would have hoped he was, but you got to take into consideration now he's got Sean Payton, who's going to be a head coach who's going to run things that are his way. You've also got guys like Deshaun Watson who's coming up, you know, after all the criticism and all the flack that he received in the past. He's now starting off with a brand new slate with the Cleveland Browns, as well as Nick Chubb being, you know, a very staple, well-known running back in fantasy. Will his numbers dwindle as well? So it's just things like that you have to take in consideration. And then quarterbacks, of course, are always going to be a topic of conversation, because you can honestly win a fantasy game with a quarterback who might not be, you know, a top 5 to top 10 quarterback. I mean, you look at Geno Smith, right? A lot of people counted him out, especially after his Jets run. But look, now Geno Smith's projected to have, I think, about 300 points when it's all said and done, looking at the receivers and the targets that he's going to have with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and then Smith and Jigba coming from Ohio State. Shout out to Dallas, Texas. Shout out to The Rock. Shout out to my boy Bugatti Broach. He might have 3 dogs who might be great weaponry. I mean, comparative to potentially the future of kind of like how Cincinnati Bengals are with their 3 main receivers. So it's like there are a lot of different things that you can focus on when it comes to fantasy, when it comes to football, and I'm just super excited and super stoked because now I actually get to kind of dive into what I would consider my true realm of knowledge and give you guys insight on what there is to expect, what there is to come. And also, if you are tuning in, please let me know in the comments if you would love for me to do a fantasy or a weekly pick'ems to kind of give you insight on who I think is going to win week in and week out. For example, we got our Thursday night game coming in at Kansas City versus the Detroit Lions. Hopefully this might be up after or might be up before. I don't quite know before that game takes place, but they're going to be playing, I want to say, at Kansas City. A lot of people would consider Detroit as one of the, you know, bottom tier teams. But now that I think about it, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is definitely came into a league of his own and very respectable quarterback with Jared Goff. Now kind of realizing, you know, he's caught some flack. You know, he's caught a little bit of scrutiny. So now looking into the Detroit Lions, you know, they might have a good team, as well as teams like the Steelers, you know, with what's his name, Kenny Pickett having a pretty solid preseason, even though preseason, in my opinion, doesn't truly associate that well into regular season games. But all in all that being said, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I just want to kind of come on here and give you a quick little segment, and I'm gonna start trying to, you know, bust these things out weekly to kind of keep you guys up to date, especially with football season on the brink. Don't forget to go ahead and grab you a big hoodie, sit on the couch, tell the wife, tell the girl, you know, look, either you're gonna watch football with me or you just gonna, you know, let me be, because it's football. And like I saw, hey man, you only get so much football to watch. You never know. Football season could be over with next year. So if I was you, I would try to check in and watch as much football-related sports as I can. And of course, do not forget about the Major League Baseball season. October is coming soon. Of course, I'm going to be diving into the playoffs for MLB, as well as diving into the early season actives versus inactives in the NFL. Here in Atlanta, I got a lot of homeboys from Atlanta thinking that Atlanta's going to win a division. I think you're crazy. I mean, when you look at that division, you got Atlanta, Carolina, Tampa Bay, and the New Orleans Saints. To me, you cannot keep out any one of those teams because they're all kind of in the same boat. Saints now acquiring Derek Carr with Chris Olave as their main guy, as well as guys like Atlanta. You know, they just got Bijan Robinson and they got Algier, which is a pretty solid running back, backing him up in a pretty solid running backs room. But then you got Bryce Young, you know, who was, like I said earlier in one of my first few podcasts, who I thought was probably the best college football player in the country at the time, although Caleb Williams, shout out to Caleb, I do respect Caleb, although Caleb won the Heisman, I still felt like Bryce Young might have been a little bit better, had a little bit better skill set. He's going to be in Carolina, as well as, don't forget, you know, we got Baker Mayfield, starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And there's multiple divisions that we could definitely chop into, man, especially the NFC East. Shout out to the Cowboys, bro. Forget the Eagles. Don't nobody care about the Eagles, but shout out to Jalen Hurts. Shout out to all the black quarterbacks that are finally getting their time to shine and their defining moments in their career paths that I think is very well deserved and very much so respected. And speaking of black quarterbacks, looking into the Ravens, you know, they've got considerably the first all-black quarterback room with Lamar Jackson. With Lamar Jackson coming back after doing that entire holdout session with the front office of the Ravens, trying to get paid, trying to get his money, trying to get a deal competitive to Deshaun Watson. That's going to be a very interesting break into the Ravens organization as well, with OBJ coming in, with them getting Zay Flowers, who could honestly be a joystick of a piece when you look at slot receivers. So, man, it's just going to be so exciting. There's so many pieces that I feel like we can touch on this season that are going to be very impactful towards looking at dominant forces in the postseason, looking at dominant forces in their respective AFC, NFC divisions. And all in all, man, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share All Day with JJ, this podcast platform. We'd love to get all the fans to comment, like, subscribe, and to share. And of course, if you one of my homeboys, you want to come on here and debate and try to give insight on whatever you think may be important, I'm always open for it. But just know when it comes to football, you better come ready, because I am here. I'm ready to break it down. I'm knowledge filled, and I'm ready to showcase basically everything that's going to be presented to each and every single fan of all kinds. So all in all, man, stay tuned, stay blessed, stay peaceful, and always be ready for more facts, information packed football, baseball, basketball, whatever it may be, with the All Day with JJ platform. And as always, until next time, I'll see you next week.